Brigade wants to welcome our candidates. You will have a 5-minute opening, and then we'll have a 10-minute answer and questions from the audience, and then a 1-minute closing.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Kellie Warren. It's good to be back with the Granny Brigade. We met a couple of months ago here in Salina, and it's good to be back with all of you. And chatted with a few of you a few moments ago before we got started. Like I said, I am Kellie Warren. I'm a lifelong Kansan, raising our 4 kids here, and want to be our Attorney General. And it's important that we have an Attorney General who will stand up and fight and win for our values that we care about. I'm a battle-tested conservative who fights and wins. And by that I mean 4 years ago in 2018, after I'd been an attorney for about 25 years, like you, I was sitting in rooms like this concerned about what was happening to our country. And people asked me to step up and run for the House of Representatives in Kansas. You know why? Because we had a rhino in that position. I think I was talking to Roger in the audience about rhinos. Tell you one thing to get elected, then go be something else in office. I didn't think that was right, and neither did Kansans like you who asked me to run. So defeated that incumbent, and then defeated the Democrat as well. And served as a conservative voice in the House. People liked the job I did. They asked me to be a bigger voice for Kansas. Our conservative values were not being heard. We had an incumbent in the Senate in 2020, same thing, another rhino. So people asked me to step up, and we defeated him as well, and defeated the Democrat. And now I serve as a senator and as your Senate Judiciary Committee chairman. And you know what? We've seen these last 4 years that I've been in elected office. It's been a short 4 years, but we've seen a lot. The pandemic. I remember where I was when the governor closed our schools. I remember where I was when she closed just before Easter our churches. And you know what I did? Because I was an elected official making state-level policy, stood up against it and pushed back on government overreach. That's part of the Attorney General's job. It's a big office. It's more than just prosecuting. We have teams of prosecutors in the Attorney General's office. It's more than just being a constitutional lawyer. You have to lead on policy. And that's what I bring to the table. I am the person in this race who has led on policy, because you know what? The left challenges us every single time. Some of the questions that you answered, the Parents' Bill of Rights, I helped lead on that in the Senate. We got it passed. And you know what? The governor vetoed it. And you know what? We had a bill that we passed in the legislature that would have protected our girls' sports, keep the boys out of the girls' locker room, keep them off the girls' sports team. And you know what? The governor vetoed it. You know what? I helped write legislation with some people in this room to ban any level of government instituting mask mandates, to ban any level of government from closing our schools, to ban any level of government from instituting a vaccine passport so you could go live your life. And you know what? We got that through the legislature. The left always stands up and argues against it. And you know what? The governor vetoed it. So I share this story, these stories, to tell you not all Republicans are the same, because we had enough Republican votes to override those vetoes, and we didn't get it done. We are still paying a high price for having a very liberal Democrat governor who was elected in 2018. So I want to be our Attorney General because I have the conservative record of leading on policies that Kansans care about. I am the only person in this race who does. Our current Attorney General, Derek Schmidt, he was a senator when he was elected Attorney General. And you know what? He had to look at all policy as well. He had a voting record on all policy as well, just like I do. And you know, I think that looking at policy, whether it's tax, whether it's energy, which he stands up and he fights against the Biden administration on, that experience in the Senate has served him well. Being a state-level policymaker, because you know what? The office is, you are the chief legal advocate for the state and its citizens. I've been a private attorney for more than 25 years, representing Kansans like you, whether it's land use, whether it's business law, whether it's when China was sending contaminated medicine to the United States, whether it's when we had price fixing in the milk and cheese market here in Kansas, whether it's consumer protection. I've represented Kansans like you in these regards. So I have the experience, the competency to get the job done, and also you know where I stand on policy, because it's too important of an office to let it fall to the Democrat. because we know the Democrat is only going to be a Biden ally. And we have to stand up and fight against the left because they're coming for all our rights. If they can come take your private property like they want to with the 30 by 30 Act, or WOTUS, they want to expand the jurisdiction of the waters of the U.S., guess what? They can come for anything. So we need the proven conservative who fights and wins for you. And I think I'm about out of time, so we'll open it up for any questions then. Yes.
As Attorney General, what can you do about 30 by 30? I grew up in north central Kansas, one of the counties that would be affected. So as Attorney General, what can you do?
So 30 by 30, I apologize I didn't explain that earlier, but you already know, some of you already know, by the year 2030, Biden and his administration want to make 30% of private property public property. And you know what? Government, one of the reasons government was legitimately instituted was to protect our private property. And when that is flipped upside down, we have a real problem. We have to be constitutionalists. We have to protect the Bill of Rights. And what would I do as Attorney General? I'm thinking we haven't seen exactly how Biden's going to implement it, but if history is any indicator, he's probably just going to sign some executive order and have the bureaucrats, the administrative state, enact policy. And that's not right. So I would stand up and I would probably sue the Biden administration and challenge the making of that policy because it wasn't an act of Congress. It didn't get put into place by elected officials, and that would be a problem. So we haven't exactly seen how he's going to do that yet, but once he does, I would be there to stand and fight against it, because one of the things I want to do in office is create, there's 12 divisions right now in the office. One of them I want to create is, call it federal overreach, 10th Amendment, something so that we have a team of attorneys in the office looking specifically at what's coming out of Washington, D.C. It's kind of like we did when the governor was closing schools and churches and businesses. We took action in the legislature. I have experience doing that. So we can't just be reactive, we need to be proactive as well. And so I would set up a division or maybe a advisory task force to take a look at that and see exactly what it looks like when it comes out. Because as our Attorney General currently says, you can't sue a policy. So we have to wait till it's written down and see what it looks like. But I can probably say that it's probably going to be an executive order or something. And that's another thing. Administrative overreach and the bureaucracy. Here in Kansas, we have bureaucrats making rules. That belongs with your elected officials. So you can vote them in, you can vote them out if you don't like what they're doing. And so I helped, it came through Senate Judiciary Committee on your ballot in November, will be a proposed constitutional amendment to put policy making back with the legislature. It's called a legislative veto because we see far too often bureaucrats and the administrative state making policy. They can make rules and regs, but not policy. And I have firsthand looking at this experience. I'm also chairman of the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regs. Out of control. Are there other questions? Yes.
3 examples of private property turned over to the government.
3. Well, there was an instance where private property was being taken for eminent domain purposes. They wanted to put a highway through a neighborhood without following the Fifth Amendment, your right to be compensated if government was going to take your property. That was a right that we, in my law firm, that we took to the Kansas Supreme Court and had that put into place so that wherever you live in Kansas, if government is going to take your property through eminent domain, which is a legitimate procedure that is in the Constitution, that they would have to then provide you just compensation. In the case we were looking at, they were taking private property and not providing your Fifth Amendment right to just compensation. Private property rights, there's often disputes between businesses. It's your most important asset if you're a business owner. And what I try to do as a private practice attorney, one of the elements of success is avoiding litigation, right? It's just expensive. The attorneys are the ones making all the money, and it doesn't get the problem resolved. So I have a lot of examples of business disputes that were happening between my client and another client. And you know what I have to know? I not only have to know the prosecution of my client's claim, but what the defense on the other side is. And so you have to know, looking at both sides, because you have to fight and win Doesn't do your client any good if you don't win. It doesn't do our state of Kansas any good if we don't win. So, and our conservative values aren't advanced if we don't win. So there'd be a couple of examples there in the private business sector disputes. It was where we could look at as well. So.
But what kind of property was that?
Land, a lot of land disputes, land use. There was some land use, yes, too, farmland, exactly. I don't claim or profess to be an agriculture expert, but you know what? As a senator and looking at policy, I know who to turn to. And as Attorney General, I would always have an open door to those leaders in the ag industry and the energy industry as well, because I know how to be a leader and when to turn to others for expert advice.
And maybe oil wells?
Yep. Oil and gas as well. So we have all these industries in Kansas that need to be protected, which is why I'm the person in this race who has looked at policy at the state of Kansas level. I serve on the Senate Utilities Committee, and I've had to look at wind turbines. I've had to look at oil and gas industry as well. So, and if you look at what our Attorney General currently does, he stands up when Biden closed the Keystone Pipeline, when the federal government was sending COVID-19 money to Kansas and wanted to dictate how we made our state tax policy here, he stands up to that. He stands up to big tech. So it's those policy leadership positions that's really important in the office.
Thank you.
Yes, over there, and then back you, Dalton, in the back.
There's been a lot of dissatisfaction with our local Saline County attorney not prosecuting certain cases and claiming that the high caseload and low pay, he cannot hire attorneys. As Attorney General, would you have any oversight on these local county attorneys?
Well, we would work hand in hand together. They don't report directly to the Attorney General, but it sounds like we have a situation like we see in industry across Kansas, where if we don't have attorneys to help do that, to help prosecute the law, we have a problem. The first thing we need as a country is law and order and the rule of law. And your job as a prosecutor is to enforce the law. We had that problem, remember, in Wyandotte County, where the city was creating a sanctuary city. And they were telling their law enforcement, stand down, do not enforce federal immigration law. And again, looking at policy, our Attorney General brought legislation to the legislature. He testified, I testified. We are not going to have any sanctuary cities in Kansas. You are law enforcement, you follow federal immigration law, and we're not going to stand for that. So we did, you bet, we got that done. And that's what I'm talking about. You lead on policy. So if we have prosecutors, because I do hear about the prosecutors who are soft on crime, look at California.
Well, that's what I'm afraid of. California's coming here.
Exactly.
And if we don't have prosecutors in the office, how do we deal with that problem?
And I would say, a lot of the prosecutors, if you're a district attorney, you're often elected. So we need to take a look at that. And I would make sure that if we had a problem with law enforcement or our prosecutors weren't prosecuting the law, I would certainly be looking into that. Because again, that's your first rule in your first job, is if we don't have order, we don't have liberty. We have to have order first before we can have liberty. And our first line of defense to do that is our prosecutors and our law enforcement and the Attorney General as well. We're the last line of defense against overreach in government of whatever that looks like, and our last line of defense to stand up and defend the laws enacted here in Kansas. When Value Them Both passes, which I believe it will, we're going to be sued, because that's what the left does, right? And I want you to know that senator that I defeated in 2020, he was the one Republican senator who voted no on Value Them Both when it failed in the legislature. So I ran against him, defeated him, and then Value Them Both came through Senate Judiciary Committee, and I led that to passage and on your ballot. That's how much Value Them Both means to me. And so we need to stand up and defend that, because they're going to sue, we know, right? They probably have the lawsuit written already, don't they?
Follow up to that, the Douglas County attorney Friday stated she would not prosecute abortion cases.
I mean, that's criminal to me, that you're not standing up and enforcing the law. So we would definitely have to take a look at that, because that's your job. Why aren't you doing your job? And before time runs out, I want to get to Dalton, who has a question in the back, because I think I'm at about 30 seconds.
If you become the Kansas Attorney General, and we have prosecutors that refuse to do their job, what can the Attorney General's office do to force it? Can they take the case out of the district attorney's hands without them and prosecute it through the state attorney's office and not through the district attorney's office? If the district attorney, like you have now, refuses to do his job.
Well, you could probably look at some impeachment procedures as well. And again, that's why you have to be discerning. And if you have an elected prosecutor, an elected district attorney, you have to look at, it's not enough to be conservative and you don't win, or it's not enough to tell us that you are, but we don't know. So I'm not certain whether the county or the district attorney here is elected or not, but something definitely to look into. Thank you, appreciate it. And I'll do my closing later.
Thank you.
Yes, who do you want me to?
Tony, you're up next.
Okay, thank you. Let me just finish a note on something I want to follow up on. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and introduce myself to folks. Never having held political office, never having even sought political office, I'm not a name that's widely known across the state. So thank you to the Granny Brigade for this opportunity. My name is Tony Mattivi. I'm running to be your next Attorney General. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, if you don't mind. I live in Topeka. My wife Mary is a state district court judge. She was appointed to the bench by Governor Brownback about 10 years ago. We have 3 mostly grown kids. Julia's 25. She is a nurse in the ICU at Overland Park Regional. Her youngest sister Hope just finished her freshman year at Kansas State. She wants to be a PA. And in between the girls is Matthew. He's 22. He enlisted in the Navy out of high school and is now a corpsman stationed at Walter Reed in D.C. I have been in Kansas since 1991 when I moved here to go to law school. It just so happens that the lady standing right behind me in the orientation line was Mary, my wife. So we've been married now and raised all 3 of our kids here and consider ourselves very fortunate to be Kansans. We've been here for all 31 of those years with the exception of 6 months that I spent in Baghdad prosecuting war crimes cases in 2007 and about 2 years we all lived out in D.C. while I was prosecuting the USS Cole bombing case. So that sort of segues into my career. I started in the DA's office in Topeka in 1993 prosecuting speeding tickets, and I worked my way up to murder cases. And then from 1996 to 98, I worked in the Kansas Attorney General's office. I'm the only candidate in the race who's actually worked in the AG's office. And then in 1998, I went to work for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Topeka, first prosecuting drug cases, including complex drug organization cases, Jamaican organized crime, Chinese organized crime, Mexican drug cartels. In 2007, I went to Baghdad. I was there for 6 months. I helped the Iraqis try and convict Chemical Ali, Saddam's cousin. He was later executed for his part in war crimes and atrocities that he committed in the case that I worked with the Iraqis on. I came back from that and I did the office's major cases, including the death penalty cases. A lot of the murders, the kidnappings, the carjackings, things like that. A lot of people don't know the Kansas Attorney General plays a role in every single death penalty case that's prosecuted in state court in Kansas. I'm the only candidate for Attorney General who's ever handled a death penalty case, the only one that's ever been within 100 yards of a death penalty case. I came back, in 2008, then I went to prosecute one of the Guantanamo detainees. I spent almost 5 years as the lead prosecutor before a Capitol Military Commission at Guantanamo. Military judge, I led a joint military-civilian team that was prosecuting the guy that Osama bin Laden sent to Yemen to commit the attack that ended up being the bombing of the USS Cole, killed 17 American sailors and seriously injured 36 others. I did a number of other national security cases here in Kansas that you may have heard of. I retired from the Department of Justice in 2020. I am now in-house counsel for a healthcare company. I do civil litigation now, and I'm the corporate vice president for a $175 million a year corporation. I think this race presents a very sharp contrast between one career prosecutor and seasoned litigator and 2 career politicians. The Kansas Attorney General's office has 12 divisions. Arguably every single one of them touches in one way or another on investigation or prosecution or both. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation is a component of the AG's office. I believe that the person making the decisions about those critical issues should be someone making decisions based on a career's worth of experience and not based on a political agenda. And that's why I'm running. If you're okay with the idea of the chief law enforcement official of your state being a career politician, there are 2 of them in this race for you to choose from. But if you believe that their state's chief law enforcement official really ought to be a law enforcement official, that your state's top legal officer be someone with 30 years of experience stepping into the courtroom and winning the tough cases, there is only one candidate in the race who brings to you those qualifications. It will be my privilege to stand up in front of the Kansas Supreme Court or the United States Supreme Court and represent the citizens of the state of Kansas. And that's why I'm running to be your Attorney General. I'll be happy to take questions. Yes, sir.
Where do you stand with the red flag laws?
In 10 years as a paramedic, I remember very vividly many of the calls that I ran where children were shot, and they're heartbreaking. But at the same time, I'm a lifetime member of the NRA. I carry a firearm for personal protection almost every day. I think that as Republicans, we have to be vigilant about people using tragedies like we have seen recently in Uvalde as an excuse to impinge on our Second Amendment rights. As Attorney General, I will push back against any attempts to impinge on the Second Amendment rights of any Kansan. Sir.
In regard to the red flag situation and such, I thought it
Can I tell you that this past week was a very good week for conservatives when it comes to the United States Supreme Court? Right, we had the school choice case out of Maine, which was a very good decision for conservatives. We had the Second Amendment case out of New York, where the United States Supreme Court said that you can't regulate firearms to the extent that your right becomes a privilege. And so I think that may be where you're going with that, so that's why I mentioned that.
to the aspects of revolving door criminals rather than as the situation is now, law-abiding gun owners are punished through the opposite party. That to take control of eliminating firearms altogether is how come we can't, instead of a revolving door, lock them up and just keep them there.
Right. I think that anybody who commits a crime with a firearm should do time. I think that should be the case across the board. Now, I will say, generally speaking, I don't think we need any new laws, right? A person who enters a school and commits mass murder is already doing something illegal, okay? We don't need more laws. We need to enforce the laws that we have. And with regard to your, thank you. With regard to your question about the revolving door, this is one of the reasons that I think it's so critically important right now that we have an Attorney General who's an experienced law enforcement official. And here's why. We're at this time in our society where we're experiencing this perfect storm of events. Right? We have efforts to defund the police. We have attempts to establish sanctuary cities in our own state. We have a profound disrespect for the rule of law. And we as a society have reached this point with criminal justice issues where in order to be considered socially enlightened, which is important to some people, you have to be soft on crime. And the result of that we're seeing is this wrong-headed approach to criminal justice issues where we're seeing the elimination of mandatory minimum sentences. We're seeing prison sentences shortened. We're seeing people let out of prison early. We're seeing bail reform in a way that people who are awaiting trial on violent crimes are put back into the community while they're awaiting trial. And then we're surprised that the crime rate is going up in Kansas right now. The violent crime rate is up. The murder rate is skyrocketed. Nobody who's paying attention to what's happening in criminal justice should be surprised by the increase that we're seeing in the crime rate. And as your Attorney General, I will be leading the charge on correcting that wrong-headed approach to criminal justice. So this gentleman had a question. Do you mind if I address your question about the county attorney's office? The last time I spoke with Jeff, he has a staff of 8 attorneys. 3 of them had left, and one of them was about to leave because I think she was going to get hired by the JAG Corps. Okay, that's a problem, and we're seeing it all across the state. Every county attorney that I talk to, and I have been endorsed by 30 of them, okay, every county attorney that I talk to is understaffed and under-resourced. And the way that plays out is they don't have the resources to prosecute the same number of cases that they've prosecuted in years past. So it looks like they're not doing their job, and in reality, they're handcuffed by the fact that they don't have enough prosecutors. Same thing's happening in law enforcement, okay? The way that I would fix that problem as your Attorney General, I'm not going to give you a non-specific answer where I say I'm going to look at it. I'll tell you how I'm going to fix it. Typically, the Attorney General is responsible for helping county attorneys and district attorneys on cases that they don't have the resources to prosecute, right? When I was in the office, I traveled around the state prosecuting arson cases, okay? They're called in to handle murder cases in a small county. They're called in to handle capital murder. They're called in to handle public corruption, okay? Typically, the office has been used to handle those high-profile cases. Now, because county attorneys are so understaffed and underfunded, I would change the office around to help not just with the big cases, but with the more mundane cases that the county attorney just can't keep up with because of resource shortages, right? What we're seeing now, after 2 years of having a lid put on the criminal justice system and all of these trials backing up, is the county attorneys can't keep up with things like routine motion hearings. So what I want to do is I want to assign one of my prosecutors to a region so that every county attorney in that region has a resource in the AG's office that he or she can call and say, hey, look, can you come out and handle this motion docket for me? Can you do this? Can you do that? I want to provide them a resource with the everyday issues that are the ones that are causing the citizens to go complain to the county commission about. We've got to help the prosecutors get back up and running in this post-COVID age that has so dramatically damaged the criminal justice system and the legal system. Dalton.
So your treasurer, Mark Bennett, the Central County District Attorney, here in a couple of months ago came out and said one of his biggest issues is you have a right for an attorney, but they don't have enough public defenders.
Right.
How would you help that?
The same way that Mark has done it. So Mark has done a phenomenal job. Look, one of the things about being a courtroom litigator is it's always easier for you to do the job, and it's better for the case if you have a competent adversary on the other side, right? Because if you don't have a competent adversary on the other side, especially in a criminal case, then you have to do your job and the defendant's job, basically. What Mark has done is he's worked with the judges and he's worked with the local attorneys in Wichita, and he has somehow convinced very experienced attorneys in the Wichita area who normally make hundreds of dollars an hour. He has gotten them to agree to do their part to step up and help take cases in the criminal justice system that these guys wouldn't. They handled them years ago, but they wouldn't be handling now because they don't pay. Right? So he's done a really good job of rallying the troops. And I find it really interesting that the DA is going out and doing more to help defendants get quality representation than anybody else in the criminal justice system. But you have to have that. You have to have good prosecution, good defense, and a judiciary that's moving the cases through. So Mark's done a really outstanding job with that. Sir, I saw you had a question as well.
I'd like to ask you the same question, touching on the 30 thing.
Yeah, remind me what the question was.
Basically, what could you do to fight that?
So it's hard to say how we'd fight it because we don't know how they're going to implement it, right? We know that the 30% number that they've used as the amount of property that they want under federal control, we don't know what federal control really means. Is a piece of ground that's in the CRP right now, there's a way to interpret 30 by 30 where that may count, okay?
About the top, the northern two counties in Kansas, and the southern and two in Nebraska, taking away fences and you only have wooden fences and stuff.
Right.
That's destroying people's livelihoods.
Right. So part of what the Attorney General, I think the Attorney General's main job is to keep Kansans safe. That's to keep you safe from the criminals that are in your community, but also from the politicians in Washington, D.C. And when we are seeing Washington, D.C. right now intrude into our lives in unprecedented ways. We have to push back on that. The thing that we have going for us now, finally, thank goodness, we have a conservative Supreme Court. Okay, and we're seeing those decisions that in years past, decisions like the 3 that came out this week would have come out the other way. And now we've gotten good decisions on school choice, good decisions on the Second Amendment, and good decisions on state rights as they play out in overruling Roe v. Wade. So this is a good time for conservative litigation in the United States, because ultimately it's going to come up in front of a very conservative U.S. Supreme Court, and I'm thankful for that. Sir?
How do you feel about a local jail such as 40% due to minuscule amounts of marijuana?
I am adamantly opposed to legalization of marijuana in any way, whether it's medical marijuana or just legalization. That may cost me some votes with Republican voters, but it doesn't matter to me. I adamantly oppose it. And the reason is, if you look at the statistics, can I just finish this answer? Is that okay? If you look at the statistics, there are people out there who say, well, let's harness it, right? If we legalize it, then we can regulate it and we can benefit from it, from the income, the revenue. If you look across the country at the states that have legalized, it doesn't play out that way, because any revenue that you get from regulating it, you more than pay out for all of the side effects that you see of marijuana use. The healthcare system is overburdened. There's decreased productivity at work. I oppose medical marijuana because we've seen across the country that's just a Trojan horse for legalization. But let me finish with one point. If there's one thing that we can all agree on, the thing that concerns me most about legalization is there is a direct correlation between increased marijuana use and increased mental illness among our teenagers. The one thing that we all should be able to agree on is that we not legalize something that's going to increase mental illness of our kids. Sorry for running over. Thank you very much.
Kris, you're up next.
Well, I want to begin by introducing my youngest daughter, Josie, who's up here in the front row. She's 7 years old, and she's the youngest of our 5 daughters. And she's also was happy to come to Salina. She thought Salina sounded like a really cool city, the word Salina. And then when I told her there was ice cream in the deal was closed. So you guys probably know my political background. You know that I was your 2-term Secretary of State, and you know that I drafted the law that the legislature passed in 2011, making Kansas elections the most secure in the country. No state can completely eliminate voter fraud, but Kansas comes closer than any other state. So, of course, I introduced photo ID. We also have, for mail-in ballots, you have a signature verification when you request the ballot. It won't come out to you unless your signature matches. And now we have signature verification, according to another statute that I helped draft, that you verify the signature when it comes into the county clerk's office. So we have a very good system. President Trump, whom I've worked with on a variety of issues, but mainly immigration and election security, he tapped me in 2017 to lead the Presidential Commission on Election Fraud, or Election Integrity as it was named. That commission was on track to release a groundbreaking report on the extent of voter fraud, but as you may know, the left launched against that commission 13 lawsuits, more than any presidential commission in presidential commission history since they started in 1976, because they did not want that information coming to light. But if you have questions about voter fraud, I'd be happy to ask them. But you may not know about my legal background, so I'll quickly review that, because I'm guessing you probably don't. So I grew up in Topeka, went out to Harvard and graduated first in my class in my department, and then I went to Yale Law School. After law school, I came back to Kansas, clerked on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, and those are the clerks are the ones who write the opinions for the judges. Then after that, I became a professor of constitutional law, and I served as a professor of constitutional law for 15 years, and then I gave up that job, gave up tenure to become your Secretary of State. I also taught legislation, immigration, and legal history while I was there. But while I was a professor of constitutional law, and really for the past 20 years, I have a practice in complex civil litigation. That's a fancy way of saying I defend state laws and city laws against attacks from the ACLU. I've squared off against the ACLU in more than a dozen cases all over the country. I've represented cities and states from Maricopa County, Arizona, all the way to Hazleton, Pennsylvania, on the right of various jurisdictions to push back against illegal immigration. Of course, that issue has defined a lot of my career as well. Happy to answer questions on that. But I'm the only attorney in this race who's actually squared off against the ACLU. This type of litigation is not easy. This is not real estate. This is not a plea deal in a criminal case. This is tough litigation. But the reason I decided to run for Attorney General was, and I wasn't planning on it 2 years ago, was when Joe Biden got sworn in. On January 20th, 2021, he unleashed more than a dozen executive orders that were illegal, unconstitutional, or both. And I realized that the Attorney General is the only official who can stop a wayward, unconstitutional administration in its tracks. A member of Congress can't do it. A governor can't do it. They can protest, but they can't stop them. But an attorney general of a state can take them to court. And there's only one state that has been leading the charge right now, bringing lawsuit after lawsuit, more than 20 now, and that's Texas. Ken Paxton of Texas has been leading the charge. And if I'm your attorney general, Kansas and Texas will stand shoulder to shoulder pushing back against the Biden administration. Now you may think, wait, didn't Kansas do some of that too? We sign our name. When Texas goes to court, they say, would any other states like to come along and be listed? So Kansas's name is listed. Missouri's name is listed. But Texas is doing all the work. When I'm attorney general, Kansas will also be carrying that load, and that means more lawsuits will be brought against the Biden administration. I have already brought 4 lawsuits in my private capacity against either Obama or Biden, more than any other attorney outside of the state of Texas, I believe. My first one was I represented 10 ICE agents against Obama's DACA amnesty in 2012. Second one, I represented 7 Texas counties and sheriffs against Biden's lawlessness at the border. I'm going to go quickly because we're running out of time. Third one, I represented North Dakota employers and employees to stop the vaccine mandate through OSHA. We won in the United States Supreme Court on January 13th. And the last one, which I'm litigating right now, I'm representing 36 airmen, members of the Air Force, who are asserting their religious right to say no to the vaccine mandate. That is an incredible freedom, and never should the people who fight to defend our liberties have to give up their own First Amendment liberties. But that's what's happening right now. It's a very important case. Bottom line, when you hire an attorney, which is what you're doing here, you're hiring an attorney, you hire the attorney with the skills that you need. I believe I have the skills we need right now because the most important job is pushing back against an unconstitutional administration in Washington. Questions in the back?
As Attorney General, one of the people up there mentioned states' rights a while ago. What can you do in your capacity to limit federal officers performing red flag law in Kansas?
Great question. I could talk for 10 minutes on this alone. I'll try not to. But I've written for Breitbart, which many of you know is a conservative online publication. I've written about red flag laws. One of the problems with red flag laws is that not only do they infringe upon our Second Amendment rights, they also infringe upon your Fourth Amendment rights and your 14th Amendment rights, because you're losing your firearms without due process. You could try to get them back with due process. But essentially what's happening now, if this bill passes in Congress, which is an outrageous bill, and I am appalled at the Republicans in the Senate who voted yes on this thing. They're trying to bribe states into passing red flag laws. So they're using the spending power of the federal government, which is found in Article 1, Section 8, to get the states to violate the Second Amendment and the Fourth Amendment of individuals. So what can we do? We can sue. And this is one of several suits that I anticipate I would be bringing if it hasn't already been brought by the time I get there. We can sue against this abuse of the spending power. There's another case that I anticipate that I might be bringing, again, if another state hasn't already brought it, but the states are in the position to do it. And that is, did you hear about 3 weeks ago what the Biden Department of Agriculture did? The Department of Agriculture controls the federal school lunch program, which is a ton of money that goes to schools all across America, and they're using that money as leverage to basically force the schools to transform all of the bathrooms and other policies to be trans-friendly. That kind of bribery is a violation of the spending power. It's going to take an attorney general who knows the Constitution, knows the case law in this area, which I do. I've taught it for, as I said, more than 20 years since I started teaching. That is an area where we have to challenge the federal abuse of the spending power. So whether it's the commerce power, which they would love to do, there may be some violations of the commerce power in this gun bill in its final form too, or the spending power, or any other federal power. The Biden administration sees the Constitution as an inconvenience, something that it needs to skirt, get around, it might stand in the way. They see the policy end as more important than abiding by the Constitution. I will be standing up for states' rights at every opportunity, and I know how to do it. I know the issue. I won't be hiring some other attorney to come tell me what to do. I've led these cases before. Yeah.
Out of the quote, illegal voting situations that you investigated, how many did you find guilty?
Yes, so we brought 13 cases, it's either 12 or 13 so we got the authority to prosecute voter fraud in 2015, and I drafted that statute. And the way, as Mike mentioned, the statute works is either the county attorney or the Secretary of State or the Attorney General can bring the case. We prosecuted 12 or 13 cases. We got a guilty plea in every single case. There was only one case that we changed halfway through. It was a husband and wife team. They lived in Johnson County, and they also had a residence in Arkansas, and they were double voting in both states in the same election. We found out through the investigation that it was the husband who was doing it and filling out all the papers for the wife, and so we dropped the charges against the wife. So that would be the only case technically you could say that, you know, it was consolidated into one charge rather than two. So yeah, we got pleas in all of the cases.
Were any of them other than geographical locations?
Oh, there was also an individual who was prosecuted for, it was a non-citizen who registered. And when you register, you sign a statement, I'm a U.S. citizen, and this person had falsely signed that he was a U.S. citizen.
And so if I, in the statement they gave you wrong, went to the wrong precinct and they let me vote, would I have been prosecuted?
No. These are multi-state. So if you vote in Kansas and you vote in Colorado, yeah, you'd be prosecuted. If you go, Kansas law allows you to vote in a different precinct. So what we do, let's say it's election day and it's 6:30 p.m. and you're in Johnson County buying something. Oh, I forgot to vote. You can go in and vote in Johnson County, but what they will allow, but they won't count any of the local issues. They will only count the races that are common to your jurisdiction here, your voting precinct, and Johnson County. So nothing would count except for the statewide in that situation. But Kansas law does allow you to vote somewhere else, but the only votes that will count on your ballot are the ones that are common. Yeah.
The stated that there's over 3 million illegals that crossed over into the United States, and over 1 million that they have no account of. They're just taking a guess at that number. Who's going to be held accountable for what, over 150-some countries that illegals are coming into America? Who's going to be held accountable for the heinous crimes that they wanted to do commit these heinous crimes?
Well, I'll tell you who should be held accountable. They probably won't be, is Joe Biden. Yeah, it's been. When he came into office, he ceased the building of the wall. He stopped Border Patrol policies like the Remain in Mexico policy, which, by the way, federal statute passed in 1996 says if you come in from an adjoining country and you do not have documentation, you have two choices. You're either going to be detained until your immigration court proceeding, or you're going to be waiting in the adjoining country. That's not something President Trump invented. That's federal law. And Biden is violating federal law. He's not just changing a Trump policy. That's why the courts have already held, and Texas brought this lawsuit, that Biden's abrogation or elimination of the Remain in Mexico policy violates federal law. But anyway, to your point, who's going to be held accountable? There's murders, there are rapes, there are all kinds of crimes, there's property damage, and then there's also the taxpayer damage. When they come to a place, their illegal status doesn't mean that they have to pay for things that, I'm thinking about public education, and there are many parts of Kansas where the wave of illegal immigration has put a huge burden on our public schools. And so ultimately, we as taxpayers are held responsible. And the bottom line is we have to get a new administration in Washington, but the state can do lots of things. And I've written state laws. I wrote the Arizona SB 1070 law that went all the way to the Supreme Court. I wrote the Arizona E-Verify law. I will push the legislature to adopt more aggressive laws because the Supreme Court has laid out what we can do. We can adopt E-Verify. I would love to know if either of my opponents would be in favor of E-Verify. E-Verify means that you can't work for an employer unless that employer first goes online and verifies with DHS. It only takes a couple seconds. Verifies with DHS that you are actually either a U.S. citizen or you're here lawfully and can work. We can also prosecute state crimes that are central to the immigration smuggling. So, for example, Arizona had a human smuggling statute. I defended it, Maricopa County. They hired me as an attorney from Kansas to come in and defend them for their human smuggling statute. Identity theft. There are a whole host of state crimes that we should be aggressively enforcing in Kansas to discourage illegal immigration. And some people, they get uneasy about that. They don't want, you know me, I am not going to back away from that one bit. Behind you now. Sorry. Go ahead.
So, will you prosecute drug traffickers to a higher point? How will you stop, how can you as Attorney General stop the fentanyl that is ravaging our state? There's rural departments now that have law enforcement of 4 to 6 that are carrying fentanyl, or not fentanyl, Narcan for their own safety. You as Attorney General, how would you stop that?
So Tony kind of answered this question. Right now the relationship is the Attorney General can be called in to help the counties. We would aggressively offer our help, if you know what I mean. We would say, yeah, we'd love to help you here. Can we help take this case? Because you have to prosecute these fentanyl crimes. But you can't look at fentanyl just in a silo, in isolation. You have to recognize the reason we have not only such rampant drug smuggling, we have human smuggling, is because of the immigration problem. It's all being controlled by the same cartels. And so we have to do everything we can to stop illegal immigration, and that will have a secondary effect on fentanyl. But of course, we can also help the county attorneys.
To add on to that, will you, as an Attorney General, go after the drug cartels?
To the extent we can. If I were Attorney General in Texas, it would be a different story. In Kansas, they usually, by the time they get here, you may not have the key players of the cartel in Kansas and prosecutable. But yes, the various people who are transporting them, and they will have operatives, low-level operatives here. But absolutely, we'll do everything we can. The cartels control the border. The United States does not control our border. The Mexican cartels do. And that is a horrific situation. Under President Trump, it was different because you had actual enforcement. Now, there was one other question, a lady, yeah, right here, yeah. Go ahead, yeah, you.
Yeah, you mentioned one of the reasons why we hire attorneys is their experience, but we also hire attorneys who win.
Yeah.
And with all due respect, you're the reason we have Laura Kelly in office. You're a polarizing figure. So what makes you think that you can win this Attorney General's race if you were to win the primary against a Democrat?
Oh, good question. So first one, the polling. The polling already shows that I would win in the general election against Kris Mann, so we polled that specific question. Second answer, 2018 was a bloodbath for Republicans all across the country. In every single close governor's race, the Republican lost, except for one in the entire country, and that was Brian Kemp in Georgia. And we lost 33 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. It was a horrific headwind for Republicans, and that's why it's not surprising. Now when you poll, look, the bottom line is whoever wins this primary is going to win. There's going to be such a wave election. We've polled this every which way. And so really your choice is which Republican do you want. Any one of the three of us will win in November. The polling is crystal clear. You see the wave. You see what's happening right now. Thank you. Like I said before, you should pick an Attorney General who has the skills that we need at this time in history, and I think I have that. I also want to close by mentioning I had a 5-point plan a couple weeks ago I released, and these are some things that you probably won't see from other Attorneys General, but these are specific things that will happen. Number one, Special Litigation Division I'll be setting up to bring those lawsuits on behalf of Kansas and any other states that want to join on against Joe Biden. That's why the signs say sue Joe Biden. Number two, I'm going to make concealed carry permits free in Kansas. South Dakota did this in March. We should be the second state to do so. We don't have to pay a fee to exercise our speech rights. You didn't have to pay a fee this morning. I didn't have to go to church. Why do you have to pay a fee to exercise your Second Amendment rights? Number three, prosecute voter fraud. As I mentioned, that statute that I wrote in 2015 allows the Attorney General and the Secretary of State to do it. I will be using that authority. Since I left office as Secretary of State, there haven't been any cases brought by either office in voter fraud. And finally, number 4, I'll add this one in there, and that is restoring our pro-life laws. When we pass value them both, it's not just sit back and wait and see what happens. The Attorney General can aggressively move to put those laws back into place. Thanks.
I hate to use up my time correcting the record, but there are 2 things that I feel like I need to correct. Number 1, if you look at the voter fraud cases prosecuted during the Kobach administration, it was not a 100% success record. I urge you to look closer. I found at least 2 dismissals and 1 case that started out as 2 felonies and 3 misdemeanors that was pled down to a single misdemeanor with a low fine. I'll get them for you. If I had a prosecutor in my office that had that same track record, we would be having a very serious conversation about whether prosecution was the right job for them. That's number 1. Number 2, Kris has said he's the only attorney in the race who squared off against the ACLU. I know he's not intentionally misrepresenting that. I had 2 very high-level national security cases where I litigated what are called friend of the court briefs against the ACLU and won on both. Let me finish by saying, I'm running for Attorney General because I believe Kansas does not need another career politician, and we certainly do not need one in the Attorney General's office. We need an attorney who's going to make decisions based on a career's worth of experience and not based on a political agenda. Thank you all very much.
This is a Republican primary. We need a conservative Republican who can win. It's not enough to be a conservative Republican, but you lose. That's why we have the liberal Democrat governor we have in 2018. That's why you, the taxpayers, have to pay $1.9 million because he lost a case as Secretary of State to the ACLU. And it's not good enough to be naive to think that automatically conservative Republicans are going to win in November. I have never been naive and lost to the left. I win tough elections. In 2018, I didn't misjudge the left. I stood up and defeated them. And you know what? So did other governors in 2018. Also, the Republican won in Ohio, in South Dakota, and Florida as well. So you have to be right on the facts. And in this race, it's not enough to be to tell us you're a conservative Republican, but how do we know? Because you have no record to stand on. We can't afford to have a candidate in this race be our Republican nominee who has been endorsed and supported by people who vote no on Value Them Both, and who endorsed Barbara Boyer over Roger Marshall for the Senate, and who have endorsed Laura Kelly now twice as she runs for governor. We need the battle-tested conservative who fights and wins, who in 4 short years in the legislature, I have gotten some of the most consequential conservative legal reforms passed in our state. And I will continue that conservative record, and I will win. So we need to choose the conservative Republican who has the record you can look at. You don't have to take my word for it. We can win. We need to do that because we have the Biden administration. We have at least 2 more years of a Democrat president. We need to win in 2024, and I have the record of winning. Thank you, Kellie Warren, on August 2nd. Thank you all.